Hello everyone, I'm a tutor with UPLADS and we are going to learn about SQL training today. This presentation is given by UPLADS. You may contact them on their website. You may email them at info@uplads.com. Continuing from the previous lecture, in our previous video, we learned a lot of things about group by having and aggregations about min max update statements. Today we are going to continue with a few regular expression related clauses. So to start with, we have our like statement. Now what does it do? The like clause, this operator, it is used in where clause to search for a specified pattern in a column. It can also be used in select clause to modify our data. How we will do that, I'll demonstrate a few queries for you. There are two wildcard often used in conjunction with the like operator. One is the percentage sign. It basically represents 0, 1 or multiple characters. How we will use it, I'll show you a few examples. Then we have underscore. It basically represents a single character. So if I'm writing dash at uh, dash 80 underscore 80, it means that there is just one character before a, that is it could be anyone from A to Z. That if you want, you can specify, you can change your conditions using this using the regular expressions, and like is the command we would be using for identifying data. Also, there is one thing that in MySQL, we are going to deal with a percentage sign, as in this will help us identify a pattern in a string. But in case of MS Access, you might have to use asterisk sign instead of the percentage, and question mark instead of underscore. So these are some MS Access related updates. In most of them, percentage is accepted as a pattern understanding language for regular expressions. But in case of MS Access, it is star instead of percentage and question mark instead of underscore. So make a note of it so that whenever using MS Access, it shouldn't throw you any error if you are using percentage. If you're using asterisk sign instead of percentage. So let us try to understand basic data, that how exactly do we compare. So if I write something like this, hello, the output of the same is 1. That means they both match. The equal to sign has done an operation. Equal to sign has compared the left hand side and the right hand side, and it says that it matches, and so the output is 1. Let's say if I take this off, it directly gives me 0. But what I want to understand is that even if I write HELL, there is a partial match here, right? So there is a possibility that we have certain strings in our column, and we want to identify a pattern between them. That please retrieve me data for all those columns where last name starts with Z, or let's say last name starts with M, for example. In that case, in such cases, we will be using our like operator. So how do we use it? Select. Let's say if I write hello like, and now as I said, we use percentage sign, and then let's say I write ELL. Now this will return 1 to me because there is something before H, before E. In hello, we have some letter before E. There is something after L, which shows that there is O after L. So the condition is satisfied, and okay, I did not give quotes here, so let me give quotes, and here is the answer. So we are getting 1 from our output, from our input, whatever data we have given. Select hello, like, percentage, percentage, ELL percentage. That means ELL is a subset of hello. Next, what we can try to do is, let us try to do something like this. Now what it means that now this should return 0 to me. Why? Because as per this regular expression, my word starts with E. It could be ending at any letter. As you can see, there is a percentage sign. There could be multiple letters after double L. But it is mandatory that my word starts with E. But my hello starts with an H. So that is a mismatch. And that is why it will return 0 to us. Suppose if I select something like this, let's say hello, and I write like. Oh, okay. And then I write hello world, let's say. This should return me 1. Oh, I'm sorry, this should return me 0. Why is that so? Because we are expecting hello world to be present in our data, in our table. But we have just passed hello. Had that been the case, if I replace world with percentage and I put world here, then this would return me 1. Because hello world is forming a subset where world is replaced by percentage sign. But this will not be true because we are expecting this entire word, hello world, and there could be n number of letters ahead. But what we have passed is just hello. So make sure that whenever you have such patterns to identify, you are very clearly mentioning the regular expression which is understood by the database system. Let us try to use underscore now. So let's say I have written something like this. Select hello underscore world. If I say like, and now if I say something and then underscore and then world, this will give us 1. That is because we have something here, then we have underscore world as a literal with us. So it is correct. So this regular expression is right. Let us try something like this. This will give 0, obviously, because as per our regular expression, my word should start with an underscore, but my word starts with hello. And hence the mismatch, and that's why we get 0. We yield a 0 value out of it. If now this percentage sign, not necessary that it has to be in the ends. It can be used in between as well. Let's say select same example, hello world. Let me scroll it up so that it is visible. Like, let's say he, and then some percentage, and then let's say LD. This should give me 1 because as per my expression, my word should start with H and E. There are some characters in between, 0, 1 or multiple characters in between, and it should end with L and D, which happens in our case, happens to be our case. Now, if I replace this with underscore, this will give me 0 value. Why is that so? Why is it a mismatch? As I told you that underscore is used for depicting only one character, which in our case, that is not the scenario. After H and E, we have so many letters. And we have replaced all that with underscore, while underscore represents only one letter. But if I change my input here, let's say I write something like this. There is just single character between H and E and L and D. So this should give me 1. So that is the use of underscore. It depicts a single character. Now there could happen a case that, let's say, if I'm replacing this itself with underscore, this is an exact match. So here my output will be 1 because underscore was expecting one character, and this is one character that we have given as an input. It could be anything. It could be underscore itself, or it could be any other character. So hence we retrieved 1 value here. So that was about like. Next we move on to is some in operator. We had already discussed a small summary about in operator while we were studying about OR logic. As per OR logic, if any one of the condition is true, then the entire condition is true. So what is happening here is, we'll take our table uplads.persons. We have 6 records in it. So we have 6 rows in this set. Now let's say I want to find out record for 5 and 10. So my basic approach would be select star from uplads.persons, where id is equal to 5 or id is equal to 10. I get 2 records. Can I simplify this? Of course I can. I can replace this with in operator in 5, 10. So if you could see, it will check for ID if it is in any one of the set that I have given here. 5, 10 is a set. My ID will come and check if that value matches with any one value of the set, then it will give that row to us. It will retrieve that row to us. So if you see, the output for both the queries are same. So in operator is an alternative to OR logic. In OR you have to mention so many conditions. It's better to use in instead of OR. Now, this in operator is not only restricted for passing some values. We can make these values also dynamic. Now, as you can see that in this table, 5, 10 has the age null. So what I'll try to do is that I will write a query where I'll make this dynamic. I'll retrieve 5 and 10 with the help of a query. Select star from uplads dot persons, where id in, now this is a subquery. That means I'm retrieving some data from the inner query and I'm comparing the outer query with the inner one. Let me write the query for you. Distinct id from same table where age is none. Okay, I've retrieved all the rows. I get the same output. Now what did this do here is that we have taken the ID column on which we have to filter. I have given the in operator, and instead of finding it out manually myself, that which values are having the null are having age equal to null, I have taken the distinct ID from uplads.persons, where age is null. Now I will have a set of data here. I will have two records here. I will have 5 and 10 because those are the age is null. And then again id in, it will start working like the previous query, like this query. So basically, if 5 and 10 I don't want to hard code, I can directly write it in the form of a query, retrieve data and pass it to the main query. We refer to this as a subquery. This becomes the main query, the outer query becomes the main query, and the inner query is referred to as the subquery. Now definitely this was not the right way where we use subquery, because this could have been directly written as select star from uplads.persons, where id where age is null. That would have been the most optimum way to write this query. But whenever you want to retrieve id whose reference is in some other table, you may try this option. You may go for subquery. Now there is one interesting thing about in which I should mention it to you. That is, whenever you are using this in clause for a subquery, there is a cross join being performed in the backend. Now what is cross join, you will come to know later in this course, and I will take up this example again at that time. But the mechanism behind this query is that in query is not a very efficient clause to use when you are dealing with subqueries. Instead of in, we use exists, or not exists to find out the identification between two tables. Why is that so? Because in this case, we are not joining these two tables on any particular attribute. And hence, what it does, it performs a cross join and it retrieves all the data. And this data is checked across all the data every time, this, which is a basic mechanism of cross join. So it is not recommended to use in clause when you are dealing with subqueries. In clause can be used as an alternative to or logic, but it cannot be used with the subqueries. There wouldn't be much of a difference you would see when you are dealing with small scale data. But when you are dealing with big data, you will see that in operator takes more time and exists and not exists comparatively takes lesser time to execute. So this is one point that is to be remembered, that in clause is not recommended with a subquery as it performs a cross join inside the system. And cross join is a very heavy operation, as every record is being compared to every other record in the other table, which is a very heavy operation. So make sure whatever query you are writing is optimized and is easy to use. Moving to next is our between clause. Now between clause is very easy to explain. Let us first see our raw table. Here. So now I have 6 records. Let's say I want to retrieve data between 50 and 70, age 50 to 70, where age between 50 and 70. So now here, if you can very clearly see that in our table, there are no records which lie between 50 and 70. Either they are less than 50 or they are greater than 70. So this particular query should not yield any output. And as expected, I got an empty set. Let us try to change this parameter. Let's say I give 20 and 50. So now I will get 3 values with this output, 2 for 20 and 1 for 30. And 100, since it is greater than 50, it will be filtered out from the query, and null values are never compared. So null values are out of question to be retrieved. So let me execute. So you got the answer as 20, 20 and 30. Now, there is one interesting point you need to make a note of, is that between clause, whenever you are giving some parameters to it, then the first number and second number are inclusive. That means, let me change the query. If I change this 50 to 30, now I should retrieve all the rows that are of age between 20 and 30, inclusive of 20 and 30. So if you can see, it yields the same number of records. That means 20 and 30 are inclusive in between clause. So when you are using between clause, if you want to find it out between the numbers exclusive of those boundaries, then you might have to use something like this: greater than 20 and age less than 30. This will yield me an empty set as I don't have any. But this is the way you need to write. Between clause is to be used when the boundaries are to be included in your filter. So that was between clause, and it is generally used in where conditions to filter out some data based on your parameters. And the operator is inclusive, that is beginning and end values are included in it. Now this between operator, also understand that this can be numbers, that this can be date or dates. Let me demonstrate one example to you. 2020 09 01 between, let's say 2020 09, let's say 08 01 and 2020 08 31 something. Then this should yield me false, 0, because my date 1st September does not lie between 1st August to 31st of August. This just I changed to, let's say, 9. I'll get a positive answer here. That means it is true. Now, one more interesting thing. Let us try to do it this way. This MySQL is not capable to understand your dates, because right now what we have passed is merely a string value. We have passed a string value where it is comparing if it is greater than or equal to, and hence it has passed 1, even though you know that 31st is not a date in our calendar. 31st September is not a date in our calendar. There are various methods available to convert it to date format. Let us try with this. I'm sorry, there's an issue. Okay. Okay. So that to date is basically, it is used in a Hive environment. In Hive, you will deal with a lot of big data. That is where this function to date is being used. If you want to change it to the date, then we might have to cast it. Here, so the date, now it has been casted. So instead of date, let me replace it with cast date. What casting does is that it will convert your existing data type to the data type that you have mentioned. So if I cast it this way, see, now it will yield null value, because now it understands that 31st is not a date that we have. So it will not be able to understand 31st September. It does not have that date in its system. Had it been a simple string, it would have yield value as 1. That means it shows that it satisfied the condition. But if you are dealing with dates where the data type is date, then in that case it will not yield any value, because it understands that 31st September is not a date with us. And it will give a null value. That means it doesn't understand the input parameters, and hence it cannot predict the output. So be careful when you are using date columns and your date is actually not a physical date that is present. In that case, there is a high possibility that you will get null answers, which might not be correct to interpret. So that was between clause for you. Moving to next, we have any and all. We have covered with null functions. We will learn to alter our table. Before that, let us select the table that we have. So we have this table with us, uplats.person. Let us describe it and see the structure. As you can see, last name, first name, it is a varchar value, age is an integer value. Let's say if I want to add one more column to it. So what I can do is alter table. I can alter table is a DDL command, because I'm changing the definition of the table. Wherever the definition changes, it becomes a DDL command. Wherever the data changes, it becomes a DML command. So this will be a very easy tip for you to understand how to bifurcate between a DDL and DML command, because generally people do get confused in these two commands. So whenever you're changing the definition of a table, it is a DDL command. Whenever you're changing the data of the table, it is a DML command. So alter table uplads, uplads.persons. Let me add, let's say, email varchar 255. Once I run this, it will run, but data that you will see will be null. Why so? Because you have just created the column, but you haven't updated any record yet. So all the values will be by default null. So let us try to update it, which we learned in our previous session. Let's say I want all their email IDs to be, first of all, update table name, set the value that I want to change. Let's say info@uplads.com. I want to set it for all, so I will simply run this. So all my 6 rows are now changed. And now if I go ahead and check the data, I can see info@uplads.com is updated against all the records. So this is how you alter your table. Now alter table does not only deals with adding a new column, it also deals with dropping the column that we have. Let's say I want to drop this email column. So the procedure still remains the same. I have to alter, I have to use the table name, alter table name, then I have to drop the column, let's say email, and I run this. Oh, okay. Did I do something wrong? Oh, I missed the table word, keyword. Alter table uplads.persons. Yes. So now you can see that I have dropped this column. Now if I again select my table, it is back to the old structure. I have dropped that column. Now let's say if you want to modify a data type, this was with new columns, addition and deletion of new columns. Let's say if I want to change my data type for age from int to big int, or let's say I want to change it for ID from integer to big int, because there is a possibility that as my number of records increase, my integer precision is satisfied, and now I want to add new data to it, like bigger data to it. So for that I need to change the data type for getting a higher precision. So let us try to do that. Alter table uplads.persons. Since we are modifying our column, we will modify, sorry, it's not codify, it's modify. Then we have to give the column name which we want to change, that is ID, and then you give the data type, let's say big int, and your rows are affected. So now if you go ahead and describe it, you can see that the data type for ID column is changed to big int. It was int initially, it has been changed to big int now because we modified the column data type. So that's how you can, again, now this here it is a DDL command because you're changing the structure of the table. You're changing the definition of that table. So it's a DDL command. Now, let's say we already dealt with adding new columns. We have changed the data type. We dropped the column using alter. So that's how alter works for you. That in such cases where you forgot to give a proper structure to that table, you can any day modify it. But that is not the case when you are using file system. In file system, you have to check if you have enough space to add a new column. If you don't have, you have to modify everything and rewrite everything. And that's where we can see that it is very useful for us to use a database instead of a file system. So that was alter table for you. And since we have also covered primary key, I want to introduce you to auto increment, that what exactly auto increment means. Now you have set a primary key. Let's try to again display this table. As you can see, in ID column, there are 5 rows in consecutive order, and suddenly there is a value 10, which shouldn't be happening, because if we set it to auto increment, then my next record has to be the 6th value, and the next has to be the 7th, and then 8th, and so on. This has happened because we did not set our primary key to be an auto incremented value. So for that, what we will do is, let us try to create a new table. Let's say persons demo. We have to mention the database name. So create table uplats.persons underscore demo. There is this person underscore ID. It is an integer value. It should not be null since it is an auto increment. So it should not be null. And for auto increment, there is a keyword auto underscore increment. This keyword helps the database to understand that the person ID has to be auto incremented. Now we will again give some last name, varchar 255, let's say, and then age column, which is integer column. Okay. I'm sorry. I guess I rubbed it off. No worries. We'll write it again. uplats.persons demo. We have the person ID, which is int, not null, and auto increment. Then we have their last name, which is varchar 255. Then we have the age column, that is merely an integer, and then we set the primary key to be our person underscore ID. So I have this table created. If I describe it, you will see that there is one extra column here. It was blank initially, but now there are some extra comments, extra constraints I have added, that it should be an auto increment value. Now let us try to do one thing. Let us try to insert into some values into this table. Let's say uplats.persons demo, give us the values. Here I can choose to give this value person ID myself. Let me try doing that first. Let us see what changes happens. ABC, and let's say 30, correctly affected. Now if I try to insert 5, correctly affected. If I say select star from uplats.persons underscore demo, you will see that both got inserted. Now what is the use of auto increment then? So going back to the original values, let's say I take off this part. I simply give 2 values to it, that is ABC, and I give 30. I do not mention the column name. Now there will be definitely an error thrown saying that column count does not match, because simply based on values it will not understand. We have to mention columns in this case. So what we'll do is we will give this, we'll give last name comma age, and then we'll try to execute. If you now see, I have not given the person ID column here. Let us see how did it pick up the data, and what value has it given. Persons demo. If you see, whichever was the last value, it incremented from that point. So generally, it is recommended that not to insert the values yourself for the primary key, which is an auto increment value, because database does the job for you. So what you did here was you inserted values for 1 and 5 by giving the explicit values to it, and later on when it was working as per auto increment policy and you did not mention the person ID column in your values section, it inserted the new row into it, checking whichever one was the last person ID available in this table. So now next, when I again try to insert, it will give me a value with 7 and so on. Let's say if I try to now insert some value manually myself, let's say 10. So as you can see, we have 1, 5, 6, 7, and then 10. Now if I use the auto increment policy, and if I try to insert a new row into it, this time let's say it is PQR. Now this PQR value will get the person ID 11 because that's the last inserted value here. So if I execute this and select as stated, PQR is assigned to 11th person ID here. So that was auto increment for you. Hope this lecture was helpful for you to understand the basic regular expressions, how to deal with it, how to retrieve a particular pattern, and we learned about the alter table definitions. So yes, that was the end of today's lecture. And as per ritual, let me wish you bye. Thank you from you, Plats.